Good evening, Matt Wordsworth with ABC News. In the shadow of an election campaign, the Coalition has committed a multi-million-dollar about-face on one of its key budget measures, just hours after the Treasurer delivered his speech. Labor leader Bill Shorten gets to deliver his reply to the government's election manifesto tomorrow night, paving the way for the campaign to begin in earnest. Here's political editor Andrew Probin.
Because the budget is back in the black.
Out of the darkness and into the blue.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Stop pushing.
Just steady, steady. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Keep walking. Come on, come back.
Under a pre-dawn glow, a first-time Treasurer and the last one with a budget barrow to push. But even peddling pork barrels is sometimes hard going.
These are the things that are going to be conditioned by the economy people live in, and that's why we need it as strong as possible. Out in the regional areas...
His approach, taxing less. 4.5 million Australians will get tax offsets worth more than $1,000 for individuals and $2,100 for eligible couples from July. Another 5.5 million low and middle income earners will receive smaller tax relief, depending on where they are on the tax scales.
This is a budget that is backing hard-working Australians. It's a fair go for those who have a go. That's what underpins this budget.
The government's pretty much matched our tax cuts we offered last year. But yes, so from the 1st of July, whoever Australians vote for will get these tax cuts.
But it's a smaller handout that's become a tripping hazard. A one-off energy assistance payment worth $75 cash for individuals and $125 for couples. Originally restricted to a select group of welfare recipients, including pensioners, carers and war widows, there's been a change of heart.
The energy supplement will be extended to people on Newstart.
It will be?
It will be.
But that wasn't announced on the weekend, so that's something new?
That is something new.
Exactly how new?
Last night, the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister and myself discussed the issue, and we thought it was appropriate to extend it.
An $80 million backflip on a budget barely a dozen hours old.
The ink is not dry on this budget. And to see a Treasurer have to justify 12 hours later why he got it wrong.
The Treasurer can't even get his budget to hang in overnight. What a rabble!
This budget has been driven by the economics of providing for a stronger economy.
Good morning. All the best. Yeah, shame about the NDA, but we'll fix it.
Whether the Coalition numbers men simply got spooked by Labor, whether it was a political mistake or an oversight to leave it out, the late extension of the energy payment to Newstart recipients shows how fragile the government's nerves are. It also goes to show how this budget has been an attempt to neutralise Labor's advantages, almost as much as playing to the Coalition's electoral strengths.
Let's go.
That's because this fellow, who gets to deliver his budget reply speech tomorrow,
It was spontaneous bit of footage.
believes Labor's got $150 billion to spend, enticing voters with an alternative economic blueprint. Andrew Probin, ABC News, Canberra.
The troubled 45th Parliament is tonight edging closer towards its end, with the Senate passing its final pieces of legislation before the election. National Affairs correspondent Greg Jennett is there. Greg, are the budget centrepieces meeting any resistance in these dying moments of the Parliament?
Well, it turns out there aren't that many of them after all, Matt, because the government's being either realistic or very strategic about what it considers worthwhile trying to put to the Parliament on this, the only day when the House and the Senate could have worked together for the passage of budget bills. There's fewer than half a dozen of them. What is passing is happening with Labor's support, and that does include that energy payment that you've already heard about. It literally grew by $80 million overnight. An unusual, you would have to say, way about going with the business of passing a budget. But there are a few lessons there, I think, Matt, about the way the Morrison government actually works. A, it's ruthlessly pragmatic, but as we get into campaign mode, B, it's going to determinedly stick to those fights it wants to be engaged in and not be dragged unwillingly or unwittingly into those that its opponents want. And I think we've seen a bit of that decision-making in the last 24 hours.
And so, Greg, next stop is Government House. Is the Prime Minister dropping any new hints about when he's exactly going to visit the Governor-General to call this election?
Well, believe it or not, Matt, Scott Morrison's telling us that he hasn't actually made up his mind. So there were 3 clear options still available to the Prime Minister: Saturday the 11th, the 18th, or then the 25th of May. Now, the Senate, as a chamber, finishes here this evening. The House tomorrow night after Bill Shorten's speech in reply. So you'd have to suggest, Matt, that if Scott Morrison hasn't truly turned his mind to which date he's settling on and when he's going to see Sir Peter Cosgrove, a pretty clear space to turn his mind to these things opens up at about 8 o'clock tomorrow night here, Canberra time.
All right, Greg Jennett at Parliament House, thank you.